Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 8, which is titled The Foremost Householders. We're going to be studying chapters 21 through 30 today. This is where you can learn with the words of the Buddha. What I do is invite people to read a chapter. Then I share some teachings on that for about 5 minutes or so, and then open up to any questions you have. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comments section. And then if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. If you're in Zoom and you would like to read any of the chapters, you can just electronically raise your hand, and then I will know that you're interested in reading the actual chapters. So I'd like to invite you and welcome you to today's class and help you to learn the teachings of the Buddha through studying his actual words. I'm going to actually share the book here for you so that you can see what the words of the Buddha are. And if nobody volunteers, then I guess I'll go ahead and read the chapters for you guys. But it's wonderful when you guys volunteer to read, but that's a decision up to you guys. So here we'll just have starting with chapter 21, which is titled 4 Ways of Living Together. Here, so this teaching is from Gotama Buddha. This is his actual words. It starts with, householders, there are these 4 ways of living together. What for? A wretch lives together with a wretch. A wretch lives together with a female heavenly being. A heavenly being lives together with a wretch. A heavenly being lives together with a female heavenly being. 1. And how, householders, does a wretch live together with a wretch? Here, the husband is one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. He is immoral, of unwholesome character. He resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stain of selfishness. He insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. And his wife is also one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. She is immoral, of unwholesome character. She resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stain of selfishness. She insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way that a wretch lives together with a wretch. 2. And how does a wretch live together with a female heavenly being? Here, a husband is one who destroys life, takes what is not given, indulges in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. He is immoral, of unwholesome character. He resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stain of selfishness. He insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. But his wife is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. She is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, of wholesome character. She resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness. She does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way that a wretch lives together with a female heavenly being. 3. And how does a heavenly being live together with a wretch? Here, the husband is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. He is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, of wholesome character. He resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness. He does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. But his wife is one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. She is immoral, of unwholesome character. She resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stain of selfishness. She insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins in such a way that a heavenly being lives together with a wretch. 4. How does a heavenly being live together with a female heavenly being? Here, the husband is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. He is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, of wholesome character. He resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness. He does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. And his wife is also one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. She is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, of wholesome character. She resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness. She does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way that a heavenly being lives together with a female heavenly being. These are the 4 ways of living together. When both are unwholesome, selfish, and abusive, husband and wife live together as wretches. The husband is unwholesome, selfish, and abusive, but the wife is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, charitable, generous. She is a female heavenly being living with a wretched husband. The husband is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, charitable, generous, but his wife is unwholesome, selfish, and abusive. She is a wretch living with a heavenly being husband. Both husband and wife are enriched with confidence, charitable, and mentally disciplined, living their lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words. Then many benefits accumulate to them, and they reside at ease. Their enemies are saddened when both are the same in virtue, moral conduct. Having practiced the teachings here, the same in virtuous behavior and observances, delighting after death in a heavenly world, they rejoice enjoying sensual pleasures. Okay, so let me explain to you what the Buddha is sharing here. He's helping you understand how people live together and how one person can potentially be unwholesome and the other person be wholesome, or both people can actually be unwholesome, or both people can be wholesome. This is how you might decide to be living in certain situations. Of course, the ideal situation would be both people who are living together would be of wholesome character, and this is going to produce the best results in your life. Here, the Buddha is referring to a husband and a wife, which is a male and female gender, but we could easily substitute other genders in here. It could be female, female, male, male. This is essentially life partners that he's describing. So here, if both individuals are a wretch, as the Buddha is describing, this would produce very difficult experience in one's life where both are doing unwholesome things. And now the karma that is accumulating, the unwholesome results of the unwise decisions, is causing all kinds of difficulties and complications in the relationship. And it can potentially very easily end for any number of reasons, or one of these people could end up dying or having all kinds of injuries and sicknesses and all kinds of difficulties. The second one, he's talking about a husband who's into unwholesome things, so one partner being into unwholesome things and the other partner being into wholesome things. And this can be a real struggle for the person who's into wholesome things, because this other person is doing all these unwholesome things and it's affecting you. Even you're living together as a life partner, and even though karma, or the results of our decisions, is based on our decisions, if your life partner is out there doing all kinds of unwholesome things, it's their choice to do those unwholesome things, but it's your choice to be their life partner and live together with them. And that decision of being their life partner means that you're going to be affected by these things. So as people are showing up to your house and causing chaos and as you're having to go to the hospital, or you're having to spend money in order to take care of legal issues or medical bills or things like this. This is all your karma as a result of living with someone who's doing unwholesome things. And the same thing can occur in the other direction too. Here, the Buddha again is using male and female genders, but this is the same exact thing. Essentially, number 2 and 3, he's just switching the genders here. But ideally, what you would like to get to with a life partner, no matter what the gender, is where both of you guys are doing wholesome things. As you guys are doing that, what the Buddha is describing down here is that when both husband and wife, or when both life partners are enriched with confidence, which is confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, when there's charitability, or you're practicing generosity, and you're mentally disciplined, meaning you've trained your mind through the Eightfold Path, and you're living lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words, then many benefits accumulate to you because you can reside at ease. You guys aren't at each other's throat being really difficult and problematic and argumentative and hostile and aggressive with each other. You guys can live at ease and so peaceful. Your enemies would be saddened because both of you are living with the same virtuous moral conduct. And then the Buddha goes into talking about how, yes, after death, these individuals can reside in a heavenly world. But remember, the goal is not to be reborn in heaven. That's not the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha. The ultimate goal is to train your mind and get to enlightenment in this lifetime, so there isn't any rebirth anywhere. But the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that lead to rebirth in improved destinations, like an improved human destination or perhaps a heavenly world. So the Buddha is teaching you about how to live together harmoniously with your partner, and this is what's going to lead to your enlightenment. But if you fall short of that, then you guys could reside in heaven, and that's what he's describing here. But ultimately, in the heavenly realm, you still need to get to enlightenment. You haven't attained enlightenment yet. You're still stuck in the cycle of rebirth. And oftentimes in the heavenly realm, these beings are oftentimes complacent, and they don't practice the teachings because they're only experiencing pleasant feelings. They're not experiencing painful feelings. So therefore, you can drop back down into other realms, even into the lower realm of hell, animal, or afflicted spirit. So the goal would be to develop your life practice around the Eightfold Path, you and your partner, so that now you can live at ease with each other. Both of you can get to enlightenment, and you can be done with this constant existences over and over and over again in this cycle of rebirth. Let me know what questions you guys have about this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will be able to see your comments and be able to answer your questions there. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 22. Chapter 22 is titled 6 Aspects of Gama to be Understood. Monks, when it was said Gama should be understood, the creation of Gama should be understood, the diversity of Gama should be understood, the result of Gama should be understood, the elimination of the creation of Gama should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Gama should be understood. For what reason was this said? 1. It is volition, choices, decisions, monks, that I call Gama. For having willed, intentional choices and decisions, one acts by body, speech, and mind. 2. And what is the creation of Gama? Contact is its creation. 3. And what is the diversity of Gama? There is Gama to be experienced in hell. There is Gama to be experienced in the animal realm. There is Gama to be experienced in the realm of afflicted spirits. There is Gama to be experienced in the human realm. And there is Gama to be experienced in the heavenly realm. This is called the diversity of Gama. 4. And what is the result of Gama? The result of Gama, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. This is called the result of Gama. 5. and what, monks, is the elimination of the creation of Kama? With the elimination of with the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of Kama. 6. This noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kama, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When, monks, a noble disciple thus understands Kama, the creation of Kama, the diversity of Kama, the result of Kama, the elimination of the creation of Kama, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kama, he understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome Kama. When it was said, Kama should be understood, the creation of Kama should be understood, the diversity of Kama should be understood, the result of Kama should be understood, the elimination of the creation of Kama should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kama should be understood. It is because of this that this was said. So pretty much everything in the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another comes back to the natural law of Kama. When I talk about the natural laws of existence and that the Buddha is sharing with you the natural laws of existence that you can learn, you can reflect on to independently verify, and you can practice and see the truth for yourself, this is a primary natural law that the Buddha taught, and you would need to awaken to the natural law of Kama in order to get to enlightenment. There's other natural laws as well besides this one, but this is a primary one that the Buddha is teaching you, which is essentially cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. The natural law of Kama, or some people might refer to it as karma, which is a different language, the Sanskrit language. The word Kama comes from the Pali language. Some people refer to it as punishments and rewards, or something mystical or magical, or some black cloud that's following you around. That's not what Kama is at all. If this would translate to just one English word, I would use that English word. But because it doesn't translate to just one English word, I need to still use this word Kama. This is the results of your decisions. So you need to awaken to this natural law so that you can make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. As long as you lack wisdom of this natural law of Kama, then you will make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results, and you're going to continue to stay stuck in this continuous rebirth of over and over and over again being reborn. And you're going to continue to experience discontentedness over and over because you will struggle and have difficulties with your lack of wisdom of the natural law of Kama. The same thing is true when you had a lack of wisdom of the natural law of gravity. You struggled and had difficulties. You fell down, you hit your head, you bumped your elbow, you busted your knee, and all these other things. But slowly but surely, you gained wisdom of this natural law of gravity. And then as you made wiser decisions, you experienced wholesome results. But as long as you lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity, you made unwise decisions that led to the unwholesome results. You struggled and had difficulties and cried and were upset because you didn't understand the world that you were living in. But slowly but surely, by the time you got to 10 or 12 years old, you fully awoke to the natural law of gravity, and then you were able to interact in the world in peaceful and harmonious ways, and you didn't struggle any longer. You can climb ladders, you can ride bikes, you can maybe even ride motorcycles and fly on airplanes and do all kinds of things because you have wisdom, and now you make wise decisions that only leads to wholesome results. But this natural law of Kama is the same thing. It's always functioning. It's affecting you whether you realize it or not, just like the natural law of gravity. And the more wisdom you have of this natural law, the better and more prepared you will be to make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. Because part of what you're doing, a significant part of what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're looking to eliminate your unwholesome Kama. That's what the Buddha is describing here about the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kama should be understood, because that's how you actually get to enlightenment. Part of your Kama is that you lack wisdom. You haven't made the decision in previous lives or this life to fully get awake where you can now function with this natural law of Kama with ease. So you're going to need to learn this natural law of Kama inside and out, backwards and forwards. When you're learning things like the 5 precepts, that's the Buddha explaining to you the natural law of Kama. When you're learning right speech, right action, right livelihood, you're learning about the natural law of Kama. Even that last discourse that we just studied about the life partners living together, he's explaining to you the natural law of Gama, the cause and effect of living together with someone who's into unwholesome things or living with somebody who is into wholesome things. He's explaining to you the cause and effect and what you'll experience as a result of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Gama is, that when you make wise decisions, you'll experience wholesome results. And when you make unwise decisions, you will experience unwholesome results. So by gaining wisdom on this natural law, you will get more awake to it, and now you can function in the world differently. So these are 6 aspects of Gama that you need to understand. The first one is it is volition or choices and decisions that I call Gama. So when you make certain choices and decisions intentionally, when you've willed these decisions, when you've made intentional decisions, that's what produces Gama. And when you're doing that, you're acting through your body, your speech, or your mind. This is the certain conduct that you have, certain actions through body, speech, and mind. So you have to will something in order to actually produce Gama. So for example, if you went outside and you intentionally killed a human being, you're going to experience unwholesome Gama because you've made an unwise decision. You've intentionally killed that human being. Or let's just use the example of an animal. Say you went outside, you saw a dog on the street, and you intentionally killed this dog on the street. You're going to produce unwholesome Gama because there's a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will that needs to be in the mind for you to actively kill that dog. And now you're going to experience the unwholesome results of your decisions. But if you were walking down the street and there was an ant that was under your foot, maybe you were just walking to a restaurant and you didn't even know that the ant was there. You didn't intentionally kill it. You're just walking down the street. You might not even know that you actually killed it. You're not going to experience unwholesome results in that example because you haven't intentionally killed the ant. So you have to will something. You have to intentionally choose to do something unwise in order for there to be Gama to be experienced in terms of unwholesome Gama. And then the same thing is true if you're going to produce wholesome Gama. You're going to need to intentionally make conscious choices and decisions that produce wholesome Gama. Then the Buddha is talking about that contact is how you create Gama. So when you come into contact with other beings, this is how you actually create Gama. So if you if you were on your way home and you heard your parents inside the house arguing and being upset with each other, and you walked into the house and you started arguing and yelling and throwing things around the house, you're having contact with your parents, and in that argumentative speech, you're now producing Gama because you're having contact, and then in that contact, you're making unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But now let's just say you come home and you hear through the door that your parents are arguing, yelling, and being argumentative. And let's just say you choose not to go in, and not necessarily saying that's what you should do, but let's just say you choose not to go into the house. You go to a restaurant, you go to a friend's house, maybe you go get a massage or something like this. You didn't have contact with your mom and dad in that situation. So you didn't create any Gama because there was no contact. But your mom and dad have contact and they're being argumentative. They're the ones producing Gama in this situation. And this is true about unwholesome Gama and also wholesome Gama as well. And where this can really help you is that if you're in a conversation and somebody becomes argumentative and you're having difficulties restraining your mind and being argumentative yourself, one of the best things you can do is break contact and walk away from the situation. That's going to eliminate the creation of any Gama in that situation. But again, it's the same thing for wholesome Gama. Say you went to an orphanage and you practiced generosity and you gave away some food or supplies or something like this. By that contact at the orphanage, you're creating Gama. So there needs to be contact in order to create Gama. And then the Buddha is talking about the diversity of Gama. This is how Gama is to be experienced. Your Gama is going to be experienced either in the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, or the heavenly realm. This is being stuck in the cycle of rebirth. That if there's Gama to be experienced in terms of unwholesome Gama, you're going to experience it in one of these 5 realms. And then the fourth one, the Buddha is talking about the result of Gama, is threefold. to be experienced in this very life, in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion, which is some future rebirth beyond the next one. So here, with these two statements and these two teachings on the natural law of karma, what you can understand from the Buddha is that you can't run and hide from your karma. Anything you do, either wise or unwise, you are going to experience the wholesome or unwholesome results of those decisions. You can't run and hide from your karma. Even though you might do something today and you might not experience it for 3 years from now or 10 years from now, you can't run and hide. Or you might experience it in the next life. If there's unwholesome karma to be experienced, that means there's going to be rebirth. So a wise individual understanding this and being able to see the truth in this, what you would like to decide is, I'm only interested in producing wholesome karma so that I can escape all of this unwholesome karma. I can extinguish it and escape this cycle of rebirth and stop creating all this unwholesome karma through my unwise decisions, because you can't run and hide from your karma. Then the fifth one, the Buddha is talking about the elimination of the creation of karma. If you're interested in eliminating the creation of karma, then you eliminate contact. That's what I was just explaining, that if you are in a conversation and someone is becoming argumentative and you can feel your frustration building, it's better to just break contact and walk away so that you don't create any karma in that situation that is going to be unwholesome. That would be a wise decision to walk away, and it's going to produce wholesome karma. Whereas if you stayed in the conversation, let your frustration build, and now you start yelling and hollering and being argumentative, you've now created unwholesome karma based on your unwise decision. So by eliminating contact, you will eliminate any production of karma. And then the sixth one is the eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma. So it's the eightfold path of learning and practicing this, developing your life practice, that you will now extinguish or eliminate all your unwholesome karma. The way that you eliminate unwholesome karma is you produce only wholesome karma. By you making wiser and wiser and wiser and wiser decisions, you will extinguish all your unwise decisions and you won't be producing unwholesome karma anymore. But there's old decisions that you made in the past that are going to be experienced now. You're going to experience unwholesome karma from your previous decisions. And now you can handle that situation through the eightfold path in order to extinguish that. Whereas if you didn't address it through the eightfold path, it's going to produce unwise decisions, which then produces unwholesome karma. So an example I can give you is, say 3 years ago, before you learned these teachings, you might have lied or cheated on a government form. And now when you filed that form, they didn't find out about it until 3 years later. And now they're sending you a notice that, hey, you owe us $3,000 because you made a mistake and you lied on your taxes. You owe us $3,000, right? Well, if you're not understanding the natural law of karma, you might think you can run and hide from this. And now what you might decide to do is be deceptive and you lie. And that's just going to produce new karma that is unwholesome because you're making unwise decisions. But if you understand that you can't run and hide from your decisions, and you understand the eightfold path, that it's wise to be truthful and always tell the truth, now you might take responsibility for this. You might call up your government and apologize and say that you'd like to take responsibility for it, but you don't have this money. Is there a payment plan or something like this that you could work out and actually resolve this? And now by taking responsibility, maybe the government works out a payment plan. Maybe they even eliminate the interest fees or the penalty fees. Maybe it gets reduced down to $1,000 because you were honest with them and they took off the penalty fees and the interest. So this is how you extinguish your unwholesome karma, by now handling all the situations that are coming back to you through the eightfold path. And you would need to understand all 6 aspects of the natural law of karma that the Buddha is describing here in order to awaken the mind to enlightenment. Among other aspects, these are the 6 aspects to understand, but then you're going to need to understand the details of the natural law of karma, like, not killing, not stealing, not having sexual misconduct, not lying, not taking substances that cause heedlessness, and all the other aspects of the natural law of karma that the Buddha teaches. So let me see what questions you guys have. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Here we have a question coming in on Zoom from Francis. He says, is contact referred to the sixth sense-based contact with external objects? Please elaborate more. Yes, that's exactly what contact is. Contact is where the internal sense base, which is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind, comes into contact through the external sense bases, which are forms, sounds, odors, flavors, the physical objects, and the mental objects. And now when you have the internal sense base, when you have the external sense base, and then you have awareness of it, these are the three things that the Buddha describes as contact. That there needs to be the eye, the actual form, and then there needs to be awareness of it in the actual mind. The consciousness has to be aware of it. So he describes contact as having and needing these three things. And it's through the six sense bases that you have contact with any particular being or something like this. And that's how you produce Gama, is you create it through contact through the six sense bases. All right, let me see if we have any questions coming in on YouTube or Facebook. I don't see any questions coming in on YouTube or Facebook. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, and I'll go ahead and read that unless somebody in Zoom would like to volunteer. Let's see, this is chapter 23. This one is titled The Simile of a Lump of Salt. Monks, if one were to say thus, a person experiences Gama in precisely the same way that he created it. In such a case, there could be no living of the spiritual life, and no opportunity would be seen for completely making an end of discontentedness. But if one were to say thus, when a person creates Gama, that is to be experienced in a particular way, he experiences its results precisely in that way. In such a case, the living of the spiritual life is possible, and an opportunity is seen for the complete making an end of discontentedness. Here, monks, a person has created a small amount of unwholesome Gama, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of Gama, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less plentiful residue. What kind of person creates a small amount of unwholesome Gama that leads him to hell? Here, some person is undeveloped in body, virtuous behavior, mind, and wisdom. He is limited and has a mean character, and he dwells in discontentedness. When such a person creates a small amount of unwholesome Gama, it leads him to hell. What kind of person creates exactly the same small amount of unwholesome Gama, and yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less plentiful residue? Here, some person is developed in body, virtuous behavior, mind, and wisdom. He is unlimited and has a lofty character, and he resides without measure. When such a person creates exactly the same small amount of unwholesome Gama, it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less plentiful residue. Suppose a man would drop a lump of salt into a small bowl of water. What do you think, monks? Would that lump of salt make the small quantity of water in the bowl salty and undrinkable? Yes, venerable sir. For what reason? Because the water in the bowl is limited. Thus, that lump of salt would make it salty and undrinkable. But suppose a man would drop a lump of salt into the river Ganges. What do you think, monks? Would that lump of salt make the river Ganges become salty and undrinkable? No, venerable sir. For what reason? Because the river Ganges contains a large volume of water. Thus, the lump of salt would not make it salty and undrinkable. So too, monks, Some person here has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less abundant residue. Okay, I'm going to pause here and describe what's going on before we look at the rest of this discourse. So the Buddha is explaining how karma is experienced by different people in different ways. And he's using this analogy or this simile of the lump of salt, where there's a bowl of water and there's a lump of salt that goes into the bowl of water, and now the bowl of water is undrinkable. Or there's this river Ganges, which is a very large river in what we refer to as India. And if the same exact lump of salt goes into that river, it's not undrinkable. The water is still fresh because there's so much water. The water is representative of the wholesome things that you've done, where the lump of salt is representative of the unwholesome things that you've done. So if you just have a bowl of water and that's it, and you take this lump of salt and you put it in, this water is now undrinkable. You're going to experience that unwholesome karma because now the water is undrinkable. It's going to be experienced in a different way versus this other person who has lots and lots of wholesome things going on in their life, making lots of wise decisions. They've got lots of water. So now this lump of salt doesn't impact that individual nearly as much as the other one. So for example, say that you have gotten a speeding ticket and you go to court and you have had 50 speeding tickets, and now this is your 51st speeding ticket. And now the judge looks at your record and you try to plead your case and ask to have leniency. The judge is like, hey, you've had 50 speeding tickets. There's no way I'm going to give you leniency here. And they're going to, have you pay the penalty, and you're going to have difficulties in that situation. But now let's just say you've been driving for 30 years and you've never had a ticket ever in your life. Your record is spotless, and you get a ticket and you go to court and you plead with the judge to please, allow you to not have to pay this penalty. Well, now when the judge looks at your record and you've done all these wholesome things, you've been driving for 30 years and you've never even had a ticket. Well, in this situation, the judge might very likely allow you to not pay the ticket and throw it out of court because of the wholesome things that you've done in the past. So your experience in one situation with lots of wholesomeness that you've already produced versus another situation where you've done a lot of unwholesome things, you're going to experience things very differently in life. And this helps you to understand, while two people in the world can do exactly the same thing, one person experiences it one way versus another person experiences it a completely different way. Let me give you another example. Say there's two individuals who are having sexual misconduct. They're going outside their relationship and they're cheating on their partner. And say one person is cheating and they're both doing the exact same thing, which is cheating. Well, one person can experience karma, and let's just say they get beat up, they lose their reputation at work, and say that in the community, people don't respect them any longer, right? And that might be the way that that person experiences that same exact thing of having sexual misconduct. But say another person can also have sexual misconduct, but now let's just say they contract HIV or AIDS and they end up dying perhaps from this sexually transmitted disease, where the other person didn't have that experience because maybe this was like the first time that they ever went out and cheated, where the other person was having lots of different partners over time. So someone can be doing exactly the same thing, which is sexual misconduct, but they can experience it in a slightly different way or a significantly different way based on the decisions that they've made in their life. And that's what the Buddha is explaining here. And now he's going to give you some examples of how people come from different backgrounds, and because of their different background and the things that they've done in the world, they will experience their karma in different ways. Here, monks, someone is imprisoned for stealing half a kapahana, which is a coin or currency, a kapahana or 100 kapahanas, while someone else is not imprisoned for stealing the same amount of money. What kind of person is imprisoned for stealing half a kapahana, a kapahana, or 100 kapahanas? Here, someone is poor with little poverty and wealth. Such a person is imprisoned for stealing half a kapahana, or 100 kapahanas. What kind of person is not imprisoned for stealing half a kapahana, or 100 kapahanas? Here, someone is rich, with much money and wealth. Such a person is not imprisoned for stealing half a kapahana, or 100 kapahanas. So too monks. Some person has created a small amount of unwholesome kama, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of kama, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less abundant residue. So I'm going to stop here and explain this part to you. What you're interested in doing is you're interested in experiencing your kama, your unwholesome kama in this life. If you're collecting up so much unwholesome kama that you don't have the opportunity to experience it in this life, that means you're going to need to be reborn in order to experience this unwholesome kama. So the Buddha describing here that some person having created a small amount of unwholesome kama, yet it leads him to hell, that means that that person has so much unwholesome kama already that when they produce this new unwholesome kama, it adds to this stack, and now they have to be reborn into hell in order to experience and burn off all this unwholesome kama, or a significant portion of it. While another person maybe has quite a bit of wholesome things that they have going on in their life, and they do exactly the same thing, but when they produce those decisions that produce unwholesome kama, they experience it in this life. So if you're experiencing unwholesome kama in this life and you're working on extinguishing it and eliminating it and dismantling it, this is actually very helpful in your life. So as you're on the path to enlightenment and you're on this journey, you might be experiencing various things coming back to you at different times. And if you're working to extinguish it and extinguish it and extinguish it, essentially like bury it in the sand through making wise decisions, then this is actually really helpful for you, because you're getting rid of your unwholesome kama and you're not going to have it all stacked up and have to now be reborn into other realms to be able to extinguish that. Monks, take the case of a sheep merchant or butcher who can execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize someone who has stolen one of his sheep, but cannot do so to someone else who has stolen his sheep. What kind of person can the sheep merchant or butcher execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize for stealing a sheep? One who is poor with little property and wealth. The sheep merchant or butcher can execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize such a person for stealing a sheep. What kind of person can't the sheep merchant or butcher execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize for stealing a sheep? One who is rich with a lot of money and wealth, a king or royal minister. The sheep merchant or butcher can't execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize such a person for stealing a sheep. He can only plead with him, "Sir, return my sheep or pay me for it." So let me pause here and explain this as well. The Buddha is explaining the disparity between someone who lacks resources and who isn't so well established in the community versus someone who has a lot of resources and is well established in the community. And he's saying these people are experiencing their kama differently. And the Buddha's not explaining that this is the way it should be. He's explaining this is the way it is. He's helping you to see the natural law of kama and very clearly understand what is truly happening in the world. So if you see someone who's like very rich and very wealthy and very well known in the world, and they're doing a lot of unwholesome things, and they haven't really experienced their kama very much in the world, this is helping you to understand why. Versus someone else who maybe lacks resources and they do exactly the same thing, but they are experiencing a significant amount of unwholesome results in that very life. In both situations, you can't run and hide from that kama. You're going to experience it. But the one person who is lacking of resources is maybe experiencing it in a much more significant way than someone who's rich or wealthy or well established in the world. That's what the Buddha is explaining about the natural law of kama. Now the Buddha finishes up. So too, monks, Some person has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight residue being seen, much less abundant residue. If, monks, one were to say thus, a person experiences karma in precisely the same way that he created it, in such a case there could be no living of the spiritual life, and no opportunity would be seen for the complete making an end of discontentedness. So let me explain this to you. What the Buddha is saying is if you think in your mind that as somebody produces karma, it's experienced exactly the same way by all people, he's saying you can't get to the end of discontentedness. You can't get to enlightenment in this situation because you're not understanding the natural law of karma. That karma doesn't get experienced in exactly the same way for all people. The Buddha has another teaching where he explains that if you try to figure out the exact cause, if you try to understand the exact result of karma, that it would lead to either madness or frustration. So you can't say that if someone produces, say someone steals, you can't say that if someone steals, this is exactly what's going to happen to every single person. This would be permanence. It's just not going to happen that way. Instead, if someone steals, it really depends what else have they done in their life over the totality of their life. And this other person, if they steal, what else have they done over the totality of their life? So each person is going to experience this in a different way. And the Buddha is saying, if you think that everybody experiences karma in exactly the same way, you can't get to enlightenment with that kind of thinking. But if one were to say thus, when a person creates karma, that is to be experienced in a particular way, he experiences its results precisely in that way. In such a case, the living of the spiritual life is possible, and an opportunity is seen for completely making an end of discontentedness. So essentially, what the Buddha is saying here is everybody experiences karma in its own unique way, in precisely that particular way for that individual. And I gave you an example of that with the two individuals who are having sexual misconduct. One person might just get beat up and lose their reputation in the community and at their job, where another person might get a sexually transmitted disease and actually die from it, right? And a third person might actually not just get beat up and lose their reputation, they could actually get murdered, right? Maybe the other partner finds out and they get murdered as a result. So everybody is experiencing karma in a slightly different way based on what else they've done in their life and how they've conducted themselves. So you can't just say sexual misconduct 100% is going to be experienced in this way and exactly what that way is for everybody. There's a little bit of a variation depending on how someone has lived their life. And that's what the Buddha is explaining in this simile. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular chapter or discourse. Looks like Francis, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. You're welcome to ask your question.
Wow, this is a very big, profound chapter. I'm trying to understand the fact that I had this thought in my mind a couple of weeks ago that can we just, let's say, okay, we have, of course, in our life, we have done a lot of unwholesome things and unwholesome karma. We realize that, and now we make amends and say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to focus more on doing a lot of wholesome things and getting a lot of wholesome karma. So is there a way out of it in terms that by focusing more on doing the wholesome karma can sort of neutralize some of the bad karma they've done in the past, knowing that we have to face it somehow or other. So is that something correct?
Yes. So that bowl of water is just a small amount of wholesome things that someone has done. Where you're trying to do is you're trying to get to the river Ganges, where you have lots of fresh water in your life. So this is where I talk about what we've been doing in our past when we're doing unwise decisions and producing unwholesome karma. It's like putting mud into your garden hose. And now, over the course of our life, we've been filling up this garden hose with mud. And now what we're doing is we're hooking up this garden hose to a faucet and we're turning on the faucet. Well, if you just meditate once a week and you come learn at the temple or with a teacher like once every 6 months, you've got like a little drip going into this garden hose that's congested with all this mud. But if you open up that faucet really wide and get lots of water coming in there, meaning you're coming to classes regularly, you're reading books, you're developing your meditation practice to 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more, you're getting personal guidance from a teacher, you're asking questions. This is what the Buddha was talking about previously, where he talks about developing your wisdom, developing your moral conduct and your mental discipline and all these different things. That if you get a lot of this fresh water coming through the garden hose by practicing the Eightfold Path, now you can flush out all of that mud and you can get to the point where you've got nothing but clean water coming through your garden hose. And you can flush out and eliminate all that mud because you've extinguished all this unwholesome karma. So you would like to get to the point where you have nothing but nice, clean water coming through your garden hose. And that's where you can live at ease because you have cultivated the wisdom to know how to do that. But in the unenlightened state, we don't know how to do that. We have that ignorance or that lack of wisdom, that unknowing of true reality. So that's why you're learning and developing your practice. You're not believing in the natural law of karma. You're not believing what the teacher's sharing. Instead, you are now practicing so that you can acquire wisdom. And with this wisdom, you can make wiser and wiser decisions to put more and more water into your garden hose. Not only about developing your practice like meditation, coming to learn, meeting with a teacher, reading books and things like this, but as you're doing that stuff, then in your daily life, you're making wiser decisions about your friends, about your life partner, about where you live, about where you work, about how you conduct yourself at work, your relationships with your mom and dad and brothers and sisters. You're making different decisions about your intentions, your speech, your actions. And this is what's helping you to put more and more water into your garden hose.
Okay, one last thing I want to ask is that, okay, I understand what you're saying. I guess I was on the same wave of thought now, which means that, can I say that I am now setting the right conditions for the realization of good karma because I'm doing a lot of wholesome things now? So is that, okay, can I have the thought that now I'm setting in the right condition for the favorable realization of good wholesome karma in the future?
Yes, but I would probably word it just a little bit differently. Is what you're doing is you're developing your wisdom so that you can purify your mind and uncondition the mind. You're creating an environment in which now your mind has the ability to acquire wisdom to now purify the mind and produce what's called an unconditioned mind, where you've eliminated craving, anger, and ignorance, and now the mind is unconditioned. I understand what you're saying about creating conditions so that you can produce wholesome karma. And the answer is yes, I understand that. But if you understand conditional objects and unconditional objects, what you would like to get to is where you are providing an environment for you where you're regularly reading, coming to classes, meditating, getting help from a teacher. That all is leading to you producing wholesome karma. You're producing wholesome karma right now because you've made the wise decision to attend a class and you're reading the teachings of the Buddha and you're studying them and you're asking questions. And then when you're done with class, you're going to be reflecting on this and thinking about it. This is all wise decisions that leading to an improved results in your life. So I would think about it as you're creating an environment in which you're doing that, because this word condition, you're trying to get away from conditioned feelings and conditional experiences. You're trying to get to an unconditioned mind.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions here coming in, so I will go ahead and move to the next chapter. Here, this is chapter 24. Very short, very simple. The elimination of unwholesome karma, the Eightfold Path. That's the title of this. Monks, this Eightfold Path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So here it's very clear, very concise. How do you eliminate unwholesome karma? You produce only wholesome karma through practicing the Eightfold Path. Well, how do you practice the Eightfold Path? You're going to need to learn each individual step using the words of the Buddha as documented in Volume 1, Chapter 5. There I go through and explain all of this to you. In fact, you can include Chapter 4 in that because that's where I talk about right view. So you're going to need to know with the original words of the Buddha exactly what each aspect of each one of these steps are, and then dial it in closer and closer in your life. The way that I think about it is if you had a speaker system and you had this sound system with 8 dials on it, and if you dial these dials in closer and closer, you're going to get a better and better quality of sound out of these speakers. Well, the same thing is true about your mind, is that you need to dial in the Eightfold Path, and as you dial this in closer and closer, you'll get a better and better quality mind. This is how you know that you're on the right path, because your mind will become more peaceful, more calm, serene, content with joy. You'll get more focus, concentration, clarity of mind, deep memory. You'll see your personal and professional relationships improving. You'll see that your mind isn't even in a bad mood, that you've eliminated the conditions that are causing the bad mood to arise. So as you dial in this Eightfold Path in your life and develop your life practice, you will experience improved results because you've now improved your karma. You're making wise decisions to learn and practice and train the mind, and that's going to produce wholesome results. The wholesome results, the wholesome karma, is that your mind is functioning better and better. You're experiencing more and more ease and smoothness in the world because you're now understanding the natural law of karma, and you've trained your mind and refined it through dialing in these 8 dials more and more closely. So a person who's interested in developing their life practice to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path, inside and out, backwards and forwards, up, down, left, right. You're going to need to study this and just know it cold, where you can just explain it so easily, and you know what each individual aspect of the Eightfold Path is. You can just say it with such ease, and you would need to study it. You need to reflect on it to independently verify it, and you need to practice it. You're going to need to go through these iterations where as you're practicing it, you might get confused about certain steps. You're going to have to go back and do some more learning, some more reflection, some more practice, and learning, reflecting, and practicing. And you're going to need to get help and reach out to a teacher to be able to understand individual steps in some situations. But the words of the Buddha are there for you to be able to see exactly what he taught in all the books and all the resources that I share, so that now you can dial this in closer and closer in your life. And then as you start seeing the results, where in situations where you were once angry or sad or feeling guilty or shameful, and when you see your mind isn't doing that anymore, you'll know that you're on the right path, because that same situation where you'd get angry and frustrated, your mind doesn't get angry and frustrated anymore. Your mind is liberated and free. You're experiencing more peace and joy throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your month. So you're dialing these 8 steps in, and this is what's going to extinguish all your unwholesome karma, because now you're only producing wise decisions that then produce the wholesome karma. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 25. So this is an example where the Buddha is going to now explain various unwise decisions that you can make and the results of those decisions. But it's a very general description, because remember, karma is experienced in different ways. Here, the title of this is, At Minimum Leads to Deeds. Monks, the destruction of life, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum leads to a short lifespan. So I'm just going to pause here for a second. That when you hear these things and you read these things, you don't just believe it. What you do is you read this, and now you've learned it. And now you start reflecting on it, and you look over the course of your life and what you understand through your direct experience, and you decide, is this true or is this false? And then you start practicing it. And that's where you see the results in your life. So let's take this first one here, where he says the destruction of life, repeatedly pursued, developed, cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum leads to a short lifespan. So here you think about destroying life, which is killing. When people kill, do they generally have a shorter lifespan? Because in order to kill, there has to be a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will in the mind, and that puts a certain burden on the body, and the body can't function as well when there's that anger, hatred, and ill will in the mind. And also, if you're killing other beings, then these beings are going to be interested in killing you. And it's not about human laws. It's about the natural law of karma. So think about soldiers going off to war. Maybe their government has told them that it's okay if you go to war and kill those people over there. We're not going to prosecute you for murder. But if you come home and you murder somebody in our country, you're going to be prosecuted for murder. So if somebody goes away to war, they're very likely to be murdered and killed in the war. Because if you're 18, 20, 25 years old and you're out there killing, you're very likely to die yourself. And if you come home, you're going to potentially have certain mental challenges. Some people commit suicide when they come home from war. You're very likely to die with a very short lifespan if you're destroying life, repeatedly pursuing it, developing and cultivating it. And even if you don't end up dying, what the Buddha is explaining is that you're very likely to be reborn in hell, the animal realm, or the afflicted spirit realm. So you can see this truth for yourself through learning, through reflecting to independently verify it, that the Buddha's teachings are indeed true. And then what you would like to do is now move this into practice, where you choose to no longer destroy life, that you live with loving kindness and compassion for all beings, even a mosquito, that you don't, slap the mosquito and kill it. You would like to live with loving kindness and compassion, blow it off, or, take your hand and kind of swish it away. Or if you see a spider in your home, maybe you pick it up and you move it outside or something like this, rather than allowing the anger, hatred, and ill will to arise and you destroying life. So now when I go through each one of these, you can be doing the same exact thing where you're looking over the course of your life, your direct experience for yourself and for other beings around you that you're aware of, and you can reflect on this and see the truth. And then you can practice it, and that's where you'll really see the truth. So here, continuing on in this discourse, taking what is not given, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, into the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, taking what is not given at minimum, leads to loss of wealth. Sexual misconduct, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, sexual misconduct at minimum leads to hostility and competition. False speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, false speech at minimum leads to false accusations. Argumentative speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, argumentative speech at minimum leads to being separated from one's friends. Harsh speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, harsh speech, at minimum, leads to disagreeable sounds. Idle chatter, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, idle chatter at minimum leads to others distrusting one's words. Drinking liquor and wine, ingestion of substances that cause heedlessness, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, drinking liquor and wine, ingesting substances that cause heedlessness, at minimum, leads to madness. So here you can see that the Buddha is describing each one of these things that are decisions that one makes. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result. He's explaining the natural law of karma. And notice that he's saying at minimum, he's not saying that this is the only thing that you're going to experience. He's saying at minimum, it leads to these things. So there's a whole other range of unwholesome results that you experience through making the decision to do any of these particular things that he's describing. So this is giving you an indication of some of the things that you will experience as a result of your decisions. But then there's going to be other things beyond this as well. So again, a wise individual learning this, reflecting on it to independently verify it and see how true it is, then you start practicing in such a way where you're no longer destroying life, you're no longer taking what is not given, you're no longer having sexual misconduct and understanding what that is, you're no longer having false speech or argumentative speech, you're no longer choosing to be harsh in your speech, have idle chatter, or use substances that cause heedlessness. By you eliminating all of these things from your practice in your life, you will experience improved results, because it's wisdom of the natural law of karma that is now going to lead to improved decision making that then produces wholesome results in your life. So this is chapter 25, at minimum leads to deeds. Let me know what questions you guys have, if any at all, on this one. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is chapter 26. And I'm going to take just a little drink of water here. Between chapter 25 and 26 is like halftime. All right. So here, the title is Beings Bound by Action. One is not a Brahmin by birth, nor by birth a non-Brahmin. By action is one a Brahmin. By action is one a non-Brahmin. For men are farmers by their acts, and by their acts are craftsmen too. And men are merchants by their acts, and by their acts are servants too. And men are robbers by their acts, and by their acts are soldiers too. And men are chaplains by their acts, and by their acts are rulers too. So that is how the truly wise see action as it really is, see dependent origination, skilled in action and its results. Action makes the world go round. Action makes this generation turn. Living beings are bound by action, like the chariot wheel by a linchpin. Okay, so one of the things that was going on during the lifetime of the Buddha, and this is also going on now too, is that people were born into certain families, and you thought that based on your birth, you were either a wholesome person and a wise person, a spiritual person, destined for great, wonderful things in your life, or maybe you're born into a family who lacks resources, which some people might refer to as a lower class person, and now people feel like you're destined for difficult issues in your life, and you're an unwholesome person and all these other things. But what the Buddha was trying to help people see is it's not based on where you're born, of whether or not you're going to have a good life or not. You can cultivate wisdom and you can train your mind, and no matter where you're born, you can overcome any challenges that you experience. And if you're born into a rich, affluent family, you can make unwise decisions that causes difficulties and calamity in your life, and you can lose all that wealth. So it's not about where you're born. If you were born into a family that lacked resources or had difficulties in life, you can overcome those challenges by cultivating wisdom. And that's what the Buddha is talking about here. A Brahmin during the lifetime of the Buddha, this is an individual who's born into a certain caste of family, and it's thought that these beings are very wholesome and very holy, and people would go to them and they would perform rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. And people thought that you had to pay them money, and then you would go home and they would do some rites or rituals for you, and your life was supposed to get better. And the Buddha understood that this wasn't true, that it's your decisions that lead to improved results in your life. There is no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship in the teachings of the Buddha, and there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship that is going to produce wholesome results in your life. You can't do all kinds of unwise and unwholesome things and go to a temple, have a little bit of water sprinkled on you, and now everything's going to be perfect in your life. You need to cultivate your mind and train your mind to develop wisdom, and then go out into the world and make wise decisions. That's what's going to produce wholesome results. It's not about where you're born, whether you're wholesome or unwholesome, or wise or unwise, or whether you're going to have a great life or not. It's based on the wisdom that you have in your mind to be able to make wise decisions to improve your life. And the Buddha is giving not only this example about Brahman, but he's talking about these other acts as well, as a farmer, craftsman, merchant, servant, robber, soldier, chaplain, and rulers, that it's based on our actions. It's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the natural law of karma that's going to determine what we experience in life. Every single thing we experience is a result of our decisions. And then he says, so that is how the truly wise see action as it really is, that they understand the natural law of karma. The truly wise understand the natural law of karma. And the truly wise understand dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddhist teachings. If you go to volume 5, chapter 14, this is where I teach that. And you can see the words of the Buddha there, and you can see my words as well that will help you to understand dependent origination. You would need to know that in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, and you would need to be able to practice that. But just understanding it is the first step of that. So you can study that if you haven't already, and gain wisdom of this dependent origination, which shows you the causes and conditions that leads to continuous discontentedness in your life and continuous rebirth over and over again. So skilled in action and its results, that's what the truly wise understand. They understand the natural law of karma, this cause and effect, or action and result. You're skilled in that. That's the only way for you to get clarity and concentration and eliminate discontentedness. You would need to understand this natural law of karma. The Buddha here is explaining that action is what makes the world go round. This is what is going to lead to the results in your life. And then he says, living beings are bound by action like a chariot wheel by a linchpin. So there needs to be a linchpin in order to hold a chariot together. If you pull out the linchpin, the chariot falls apart, which chariot is a form of transportation during the lifetime of the Buddha. So it's the same thing in your life, that your actions are your linchpin. That's what's determining everything that you experience in your life, is your actions. So here the Buddha is making that very clear in some very poignant and very precise and concise words to help you understand that. Let me know what questions you guys have on this. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll move to the next one, which is chapter 27. Okay, so here's some more about Gama. This one generally is titled Reflect Upon the Consequences of Actions, but now he's going to break it down into 3 individual things that you should reflect on in order to improve your Gama. This is how you're going to improve your Gama and make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. If you're not doing this, you wouldn't be able to get to the improved decision-making or wisdom that's going to lead to wholesome results. This first thing is titled Reflect Before Doing an Action. And he's talking to his son Rahula here. Rahula, when you intend to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I intend to do with the body lead to my own harm or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would not lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results. Then you may do such an action with the body. So here the Buddha is honing in on bodily action. But remember, when the Buddha talks about action, he talks about bodily actions, mental actions, and verbal actions. He talks about all of these. So even though here he's talking about bodily actions, it's the same guidance is true for verbal actions and mental actions, that you should reflect before you actually do something. Because if you cause harm through your bodily actions, your verbal actions, or your mental actions, that harm is going to come back to you. So if you can reflect, you can look inward and you can think through your wisdom, before I do this thing, is it wise or unwise? Is it going to lead to wholesome results or unwholesome results? Take your time. When there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind wants to run and run and run and run and run and hurry up and make decisions because the mind's chasing after those pleasant feelings. But if you can restrain the mind and pull it back and hold it back and think and reflect on whether it's wise or unwise, is it going to lead to wholesome results or unwholesome results, this will help you clear up a lot of decisions that you're making because you're restraining the mind and you're thinking through consciously what you're doing. You're moving to this higher consciousness, this enlightened mind where you're thinking through your decisions about bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. That's what an enlightened being is going to do. And then ultimately you cultivate wisdom where it becomes very easy for you to be able to do this reflection and then make decisions in the world. While you're doing this reflection, you might need to consult your books, you might need to watch a video, you might need to reach out to your teacher and ask for help at different times in order to do this reflection. And then as you do it, you bring more and more wisdom on board in the mind and your decisions become more and more effortless. But early on, it takes a lot of work for you to develop the mind and cultivate wisdom through this reflection. Now the next thing, he says, while doing an action. Also, Rahula, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action. Does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body leads to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should suspend such a bodily action. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body does not lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results, then you may continue in such a bodily action. So here the Buddha is saying not only should you reflect before you do something, but you should reflect while you're doing it, because sometimes your reflection wasn't deep enough and you might have made a mistake in your reflection before doing an action. And now as you're doing this action, you might realize that it's unwholesome. And if you do, you should suspend that action right away, cut it off, break the contact, and ensure that you no longer do that. That's how you extinguish your unwholesome karma. Even if you're mid-sentence in a conversation and you realize, oh my goodness, I just said something very unwise, cut that off. Or here the Buddha is talking about a bodily action or any certain mental action. You have certain activity in your mind, certain things that you're thinking about. You can cut that off and let it go. That's what you would like to do. But if you're noticing that your bodily action, your verbal action, your mental action is wholesome and wise, the Buddha is saying continue to do that because it's wholesome, it's wise. Now the Buddha is going to talk about after having done an action. Also, Rahula, after you have done an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I have done with the body leads to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it was an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should confess such a bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the holy life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body does not lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it was a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, wholesome results. You can reside peaceful and joyful, training day and night in wholesome states. A verbal action and a mental action are expounded in the same repetitive phrasing. So here the Buddha is saying, after you've done something, reflect on it. Was it wise or unwise? Was it wholesome or was it unwholesome? And if it's something that you've done that is unwise and unwholesome, he's saying go to your teacher or wise companions in the holy life and discuss it. Explain it to them. Sometimes when people think about confessing something, they think about like they're going to get a penalty or something's bad about that. No, if you come to your teacher and you say, hey, teacher, I've committed sexual misconduct. I've done this, I've done that. Or I've been using substances that cause heedlessness, or I stole something. If you lay it open, as the Buddha is describing, now you can get wisdom of how to improve so you can restrain the mind in the future. But if you hide it and you keep it hidden, now you can't actually solve that. You can't actually gain the wisdom you need to overcome it. So when you're doing unwholesome things, share it and let your teacher know. Sometimes people like to only tell their teacher when they're doing wholesome things. They like to hide all the unwholesome things. In this situation, you're not going to get to enlightenment. You need to tell your teacher what are those unwholesome things. That's how you're going to get to improvement, through improved wisdom. By hiding things and not actually providing the mind the opportunity to gain wisdom, you're just going to keep doing those same things over and over and over again. So it's important for you to be able to then learn through sharing things with your teacher or wise companions in the holy life, as the Buddha describes. But when you've done something that is wise and it's producing wholesome results, the Buddha is saying that you can reside peaceful and joyful. This is one of the reasons why the mind becomes so peaceful and joyful, that when you understand the natural law of karma, you know that everything you're doing is wise and wholesome. You're not making any unwise decisions. So therefore, every single thing that you're doing, your mind can be peaceful and joyful. You can reside at ease because you understand the natural law of karma so well that you know with 100% certainty that you're not doing anything unwise whatsoever. And that's why you can reside peaceful and joyful. Whereas if you don't know the natural law of karma and you go out in your day and you're doing different things, you might come home and be worried. You might be stressed. You might have anxiety. You might even have fear or guilt or shame that arises in the mind because you're unsure of what you did in the world and whether that's going to produce wholesome results or unwholesome results. Essentially, what the Buddha is teaching you is that the natural law of karma is the most unbiased teacher that you will ever find. You're going to be experiencing the results of your decisions, regardless of whether you know this natural law or not. So if you're experiencing unwholesome results, like say your children are yelling at you, they're disrespectful, maybe people are stealing things from you, maybe you're having all kinds of difficulties at work or things like this, this is because of your lack of wisdom around the natural law of karma. You can improve your wisdom and improve the experiences that you're having. You can help your children and you can teach them how to be respectful and kind and polite and all of these things. You can make different decisions about a life partner, for say, if you're having difficulties in your relationship. If you're noticing that at work, that people steal things from each other and they're argumentative and angry and hostile with each other, you can choose to make different decisions in your life. When you understand the natural law of karma and that everything you experience is a result of your decisions, this is so empowering because if there's anything in your life that you don't like about your life, you can make improved decisions and change what's going on in your life. But if you think what you're experiencing is based on good luck or bad luck, or it's your destiny or your fate, or that, somehow you're just going to experience whatever happens, then you don't have any control in your life. You haven't taken control of your life and realized that everything you're experiencing is a result of your decision, and you can improve any aspect of your life that you don't particularly appreciate and you don't prefer. you can actually just gain wisdom through training your mind on the path to enlightenment and now make new decisions about any aspect of your life. And you can create a perfect life for yourself where the mind can reside peaceful and joyful. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. There's reflecting before you do an action, while you're doing one, and after you're doing one. And let me just add that after you've done a certain action, if you realize that either body, verbal, or mental actions were unwise, not only opening it up to a teacher or wise companions to be able to help you gain wisdom, but you might need to apologize in certain situations. And that can be really wise for you. Even if the other person was argumentative and angry and bitter and hostile, there's situations where it's really wise to just apologize and try to clear up some of your karma. And this can help you to be able to get to a point in time where you can see the mistakes that you're making and you can take responsibility for it, even if you were 1% doing unwise and unwholesome things and someone else was doing 99% of it. Take responsibility for your 1%. Learn and cultivate wisdom and apologize if you need to. Fix your 1%. The other person needs to work on their 99%, but you're not attached to whether that person does that or not. You need to be working on your 1% or your 10% or your 50% or your 100%, right? Whatever percentage is problematic in your life, work on that. And that's what's going to actually lead to improved results in your life. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Looks like we've got some questions from Vladimir coming in here on YouTube. Unsure how to formulate the question, but I hope you will understand what I ask. Rebirth is based by the mind condition, but what if a person caused harm? But in the mind, they believe that it was a wholesome action. For example, Islamic theorists or crusaders believed that their actions were wholesome and were done for the best of humanity based on what they believed in. Will that they actions lead them to hell realm, or how will it work? I'm not 100% familiar with Islamic theorists and crusaders and what they actually did, but it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you think, because your mind can be in delusion. Your mind can be in ignorance or unknowing of true reality, where you have misperceptions and misunderstandings. This natural law of Gama is going to affect you whether you're aware of it or not. So I think what you're describing here is that at different times in history, people went out and murdered and killed and were in wars, killing, think that they were doing this for beneficial purposes. There's no such thing as a compassionate killing. You can't go out and murder in war and not experience those results. No matter what you believe in, that your cause is worthy, you're still going to experience the results of your decisions. And that's why some people who go off into war thinking that they have a very valid reason for that war, if they're out there in the war killing and doing those kinds of things, they're going to experience the results of that. That's why they get killed. That's why they get injured. That's why people commit suicide and have all kinds of difficulties mentally having come back from a war. So it doesn't matter what you believe in. What the Buddha is describing is the truth of what actually is occurring. So that's what you would like to pay attention to. The more you see the truth in that, you're not believing in the natural law of Gama, but you can see the truth in it. So an individual who does something like what you're describing, going off with this belief that they have some righteous cause, and this gives them the benefit of going out and now killing for that righteous cause, that's not going to result in wholesome results for them. They're going to experience the unwholesome results of those unwise decisions. Because of their lack of wisdom, they're making unwise decisions, and they're clinging to a perception, and they're clinging to their choices and decisions. And now, because of that unwise decision, they're going to experience more and more unwholesome results in this life or in some future life. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let's go on to the next chapter. As you guys see here, I've got lots of words to help you guys understand. Just for those of you guys that maybe haven't joined our class before, you can see what we've got here is we've got the words of the Buddha. We've got a reference back to the original source teachings, so you can reference the Pali Canon. And then you've got words from me to help you further understand each individual chapter. And you can download these books from buddhadailywisdom.com, and they're free. or you can take it and go print it, or you can order printed copies from Amazon. And you can read these before and or after class to be able to help you fully understand the teachings of the Buddha and then be able to reflect on them and practice them to experience improved results in your life. So here, chapter 28, fulfilling the goal of asceticism. Monks, this is the lowest form of livelihood, that is, gathering alms food. In the world, this is a term of abuse. You alms food gatherer, you roam about with a begging bowl in your hand, and yet, monks, clansmen intent on the wholesome take up that way of life for a valid reason. It is not because they have been driven to it by kings that they do so, nor because they have been driven to it by thieves, nor owing to debt, nor from fear, nor to earn a livelihood. But they do so with the thought, I am immersed in birth, aging, and death, in sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. I am immersed in discontentedness, oppressed by discontentedness. Perhaps an ending of this entire mass of discontentedness might be attained. So let me explain this first part first. Here it's important to see that the Buddha is describing being ordained as the lowest form of livelihood. Oftentimes in the world today, people prop ordained practitioners up and look at them as being so holy and that they are below the ordained practitioners. Or ordained practitioners might think that they're above household practitioners. But it's important for you to understand that the Buddha describes that his form of livelihood as an ordained practitioner is the lowest form of livelihood. And it's important for an individual to think of themselves as equal, that everybody's equal. But here you can see in the Buddha's own words that he looks at the ordained practitioners as being the lowest form of livelihood because you're living in this homelessness, right? So if you're an ordained practitioner, it's important for you to remain humble and not put yourself above other people. Show respect to people and understand that they're supporting you in your journey on this ordained path. And for those of you guys who are household practitioners interacting with ordained practitioners, understand that they're human beings just like everyone else and that they're struggling on their way to enlightenment. And they're going to make mistakes along the way. They're not perfect. They're not enlightened yet. They're in the journey towards enlightenment. There surely are ordained practitioners who are enlightened, but not all of them are, and not many of them are. Nowadays, we see a large majority of the ordained practitioners that aren't enlightened. So they're going to have struggles and difficulties. And rather than venerating them so highly that you put them above you and think that you can't live a holy life, instead see them as equals, just like you. Respect them and have gratitude for them, but don't put them up so high that it degrades your mind thinking that you can't live a wholesome life. So the Buddha is describing here that people don't get ordained out of coercion. They're not being forced into this life of being an ordained practitioner, that it's something that they've chosen by themselves. And the reason why people choose to do that is because they're interested in getting to enlightenment. That's the only goal during the lifetime of the Buddha of why you would ordain. Nowadays, people ordain for any number of different reasons, maybe escaping poverty, maybe eliminating a substance abuse problem, maybe they've had a difficult time in a relationship, or maybe their partner has died, any number of different reasons why people might ordain. But they also might ordain because they're interested in getting to enlightenment. No matter what reason you decided to ordain, your goal should be to get to enlightenment. And that's what the Buddha is describing here, is that if you understand that you're stuck in this constant cycle of rebirth, of birth, aging, and death, and you're continually experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again, the reason to ordain is to be able to get to enlightenment. But you can also get to enlightenment from the household life as well. You're not required to ordain in order to get to enlightenment. That's one way that someone might choose to get to enlightenment, because then they're focusing a significant portion of their day and their time on working to get to enlightenment. But you can also accomplish these same things of getting to enlightenment from the household life as well. There's no difference between the mind of an ordained practitioner and a household practitioner. The mind functions the same way. So when you're training your mind, you can now learn and develop your mind, whether you're in the ordained path or you're as a household practitioner. Putting on a robe and shaving your head doesn't in and of itself change anything about the mind. The individual has just decided to go on this journey to now potentially make their way to enlightenment by living in this womb of the monastery that is now created by household practitioners. And now the household practitioners and the ordained practitioners are living in this life of mutual support, where the household practitioners are supporting the ordained practitioners to live in this womb. And now as the ordained practitioners are cultivating their wisdom, they're sharing those teachings back with the household practitioners to be able to help them to get further and further along on their journey to enlightenment. So now let's see what else the Buddha has to say. In such a way, monks, that this householder has gone forth, yet he is craving, inflamed by desire for sensual pleasures, with a mind full of ill will, with intentions corrupted by hate, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, scatterbrained, loose in his sense bases, just as wood from a funeral bonfire, burning at both ends and smeared with excrement in the middle, cannot be used as timber either in the village or in the forest. In such a way do I speak about this person. He has missed out on the enjoyments of a householder, yet he does not fulfill the goal of asceticism. So here what the Buddha is saying is, once somebody is ordained, nobody's forced them to ordain, to become ordained, but yet while they're ordained, they're not doing the training. They're not doing the work. They're, embroiled in their craving. They're inflamed by this desire for sensual pleasures. Their mind is full of ill will, anger, hatred, that their mind is muddled or lacking this clear comprehension. It's unconcentrated. The mind is scattered. An individual is loose in their sense bases. They're not restraining their mind. So if an individual ordains and then they're conducting themselves in this way, meaning that they're unenlightened, the Buddha is basically saying that they're useless, that they haven't fulfilled the goal of being ordained, that they're ordaining and they're not participating in householder life, in the enjoyments of householder life, but yet they're living this life of being ordained and they're not of any use to themselves or to anybody else. And he's using this analogy of a piece of wood that has been burning on both sides of the wood, and in the middle it's smeared with excrement or feces or poop, because you can't pick it up, right? It smells and you're not going to pick it up and you're not going to burn it because it's going to smell. So he's saying it's useless. This piece of wood is useless because it's burning at both ends and it's smeared with excrement. So the same thing is true about someone who goes into the holy life of being ordained and they're not actively training their mind. If you ordain, you should be actively training your mind on the path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 29. This is titled, Give Gifts to the Community. My family gives gifts, Venerable Sir, and those gifts are given to monks who are arahants on the path to arahantship, those who are forest dwellers, alms food collectors, and wearers of rag robes. Since householder, you are a household practitioner enjoying sensual pleasures, living at home in a house full of children, using sandalwood from Kasi, wearing garlands, scents, and ointments, and receiving gold and silver. It is difficult for you to know these are arahants, enlightened beings, or on the path to arahantship. If householder, a monk who is a forest dweller, is restless, puffed up, conceited, talkative, rambling in his talk, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, with a wandering mind, with loose sense bases, then in this respect he is blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. But if a monk who is a forest dweller is not restless, puffed up, and conceited, is not talkative and rambling in his talk, but has mindfulness established, clearly comprehends, is concentrated, with singleness of mind, with restrained sense bases, then in this respect he is praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. If a monk who resides on the outskirts of a village if a monk who is an alms food collector, if a monk who accepts invitations to meals, if a monk who wears rag robes, or if a monk who wears robes given by householders is restless, puffed up, conceited, talkative, rambling in his talk, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, with a wandering mind, with loose sense bases, then in this respect he is blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. But if a monk who resides on the outskirts of a village, if a monk who is an alms food collector, if a monk who accepts invitations to meals, if a monk who wears rag robes, or if a monk who wears robes given by householders is not restless, puffed up, and conceited, is not talkative and rambling in his talk, but has mindfulness established, clearly comprehends, is concentrated, with singleness of mind, with restrained sense bases, then in this respect he is praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Come now, householder, give gifts to the community. When you give gifts to the community, your mind will be confident. When your mind is confident, with the breakup of the body after death, you will be reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Venerable Sir, from today onwards, I will give gifts to the community. So here, this individual is talking to the Buddha at the beginning, and he's saying that his family gives gifts to enlightened beings, to arahants, or those on the path to getting to enlightenment. And the Buddha says, well, since you're a household practitioner and you're not enlightened yet, and essentially you're living this life indulging in sensual pleasures, you don't really understand how to determine if someone is enlightened or not. That's why he says it's difficult for you to know that these are arahants or enlightened beings or on the path to enlightenment. So the Buddha now gives this person some guidance of how to determine if someone is either enlightened or they're on the path to arahantship. He says, if a monk who is a forest dweller is restless, their mind being overactive, puffed up and conceited, this is like boastful, right? And arrogant and prideful. Talkative, this is like rambling speech, blah, 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 just on and on and on and on and on. They're muddle-minded, lacking this clear comprehension and unconcentrated. The mind is confused and distracted easily. With a wandering mind, right? That's the distraction of the mind. With loose sense bases, meaning they indulge in all these sensual pleasures. Then he's saying, essentially, this person isn't really well developed in their practice to get to enlightenment. And this is how you know that it would be unwise to make offerings to this particular type of person or this particular type of teacher. But if someone is not puffed up, they're not restless or conceited or talkative, or they have mindfulness well established, they have clear comprehension, they're concentrated, they practice singleness of mind, they're restrained in their sense bases. These are the type of individuals that he says to make offerings to, because it's helping them to get closer and closer to enlightenment or support them in their enlightenment, so that then, as an ordained practitioner, they would be able to teach others and help others. Not all enlightened beings are going to choose to be teachers, but those who are ordained or those who are teachers, if they're practicing in this way, then you know that they're either enlightened or on the journey getting close to enlightenment. And then the Buddha gives some other guidance around this same type of thing too. That if one lives on the outskirts of a village, who is an alms food collector, accepts invitations to meals, wears rag robes, wears robes given by household practitioners, if they're restless and puffed up and all those other things. And then the other side of that is someone who doesn't have those things. And he says, make offerings, because if you make offerings to individuals who are sharing the teachings into the world, this allows more and more people to be able to develop their practice. Whereas if we didn't support teachers and ordained practitioners who are sharing teachings, then the teachings wouldn't come into the world. So you need to practice generosity in order to get to enlightenment so that you can eliminate your selfishness. And you need to practice generosity with lots of people. But also you can practice generosity in the direction of individuals who are teaching the teachings of the Buddha, to support them in their ability to teach. Because some teachers, what they're doing is they're giving up worldly possessions in their worldly life. That's what the Buddha taught. And then you can enter into this life of sharing the teachings and be completely involved in doing that. And it's the offerings from the students that allows an individual to do that. And where you see somebody practicing in this way, that means they're very far in their practice, either enlightened or close to it. And now that's beneficial to support that individual so that more and more people can learn the teachings of what it took for that person to get to that concentrated and clear mind where they're practicing very well. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So we will go to the very last chapter for today, which is chapter 30. Do not prevent another from giving. So these two are based on generosity. I can't really pronounce this person's name. I think it's Vakcha. I'll just call it student. Student, one who prevents another from giving a gift creates an obstruction and stumbling block for 3 people. What 3? He creates an obstruction to 1. The donor's acquiring of merit. 2. To the recipient's gaining a gift. And 3. Already he has harmed and injured himself. One who prevents another from giving creates an obstruction and stumbling block for these 3 people. But, student, I say that one acquires merit even if one throws away dishwater in a refuse dump or cesspit with the thought, may the living beings here sustain themselves with this. How much more, then, does one acquire merit when one gives to human beings? However, I say that what is given to one of virtuous behavior is more fruitful than what is given to an unwholesome person, and the most worthy recipient is one who has abandoned 5 factors and possesses 5 factors. What 5 factors has he abandoned? 1. Sensual desire. 2. Ill will. 3. Complacency. 4. Restlessness and worry. And 5. Doubt. These are the 5 factors that he has abandoned. And what 5 factors does he possess? 1. The virtuous behavior. 2. Concentration. 3. Wisdom. 4. Liberation. And 5. The wisdom and vision of liberation of one beyond training. These are the 5 factors that he possesses. It is in such a way, I say, that what is given to one who has abandoned 5 factors and possesses 5 factors is very fruitful. Okay, so let me help you understand what the Buddha is describing here. He's saying, first of all, that you should never prevent anyone from giving an offering. Because if somebody's interested in practicing generosity, whether it's just with an average person or with a teacher, they're practicing generosity. And this is really good to eliminate their craving, desire, attachment. So it would be unwise to prevent anybody from giving an actual gift for any reason. So here, if you're understanding what the Buddha is saying, he's saying that there's these 3 obstructions that if you stop somebody from giving a gift, that you're obstructing the donor from acquiring merit, you're obstructing the recipient from gaining a gift, and that you're harming yourself as well. And now the Buddha provides guidance about how to give a gift, that if you're going to give a gift, that the person that you're giving the gift to should have abandoned 5 things. This is the Buddha giving you guidance about who to make offerings to. Because if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there would have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people learning his teachings. And not everybody is going to be practicing them deeply. So he's providing guidance to help you understand, to help support virtuous practitioners, because then the teachings can come into the world in such a way that benefits countless people. So if somebody has eliminated sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt, they're pretty far on the path to enlightenment at this point. These are called the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 things that are going to hinder you or obstruct you from getting to enlightenment. So if somebody's eliminated these 5 things, then that means they're really far on the path to enlightenment. And I explain what these 5 hindrances are in various classes that I teach, and they've been recorded. So if you ever need to learn that, you can learn that. It's the very last class of each group learning program that I teach. So I'll be teaching this again in about 6 months, but it's been taught many other times in the past, so you could see the recordings if you like. Then the Buddha says, what are the 5 factors that somebody possesses that you should consider making offerings to? The first one is virtuous behavior. This is their moral conduct, the way that they practice right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. 2 is you should see concentration, focus, clarity of mind. Because if somebody's mind is muddle-minded, then there's a certain amount of pollution in there. But if someone has concentration where they're focused and they're clear, this is because they've eliminated the pollutions of the mind, and this is an indication that somebody is far along on the path. You should see that somebody has wisdom, that they understand the teachings inside and out, backwards and forwards, that their mind is liberated. What liberation is the mind is free of discontentedness. You don't see anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of those discontent feelings in others are eliminated from the mind. If somebody is liberated, that means their mind is enlightened. And then the 5th thing that he's talking about here is that they have wisdom and vision of liberation of one beyond training, meaning that not only is their mind liberated, but they now have the ability to see very clearly of what it takes to get to liberation, and they're beyond training, that they're done with their training. They've trained their mind so fully, they've acquired what's called final knowledge. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have eliminated all the 10 fetters. You fully eradicated ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. You have full cultivation of wisdom. You fully understand the entire path to enlightenment. So this person has wisdom and vision of liberation. They know exactly what it takes to get to liberation because they've done it already. They've eliminated the 10 fetters and the 10 pollutions. They are now beyond training. So if you interact with somebody of this nature, the Buddha is saying it would be very wise to support this individual because once again, this is how the teachings come into the world, that if you're supporting somebody of this type, then this is very fruitful because not only are the teachings coming into the world to help you and help others, but by you coming in contact with this person to be able to make offerings to them, you can ask them questions. If you're coming in contact with an enlightened being, you can ask questions, you can get help, you can get clarity to understand what is it going to take for you to get to enlightenment. So yes, you're practicing generosity to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. That's one of the benefits. And yes, you're supporting this individual to then be able to share the teachings of the Buddha with others to be able to get to enlightenment. But the third aspect of your benefit here is that you are coming in contact with an enlightened being, and now you can ask them all kinds of questions, not only in that situation, but you can build a relationship and ask questions over the course of your life that's going to ultimately help you get to enlightenment as well. So this is what the Buddha is describing, that you shouldn't block somebody from giving a gift because it's helpful for them. But if you're going to give a gift, be sure that you're looking for these types of individuals to be able to give gifts to. That's going to produce the most merit. But you can also practice generosity in other situations too, not just with enlightened beings, but in other situations too. This will help you to be able to get to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I see Francis, you have your hand up. If you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, you're welcome to.
Okay, I guess this question is related to the one that I posted in the Facebook group about generosity. For me, actually, this question is about generating merits. Yeah. So I normally do dana. For example, let's say we have in our community that I attend, some of the visiting monks, they come over from other regions. They give Dharma talks and all that, and it's always the lunch dana. And I do cook some food to offer together with all the other people. But I never in contact with them, I just offer the food dana, follow everybody. Would that be also considered something of good merits that I'm doing?
you are creating merit in that situation, but what you would like to do is you would like to improve the quality of your offering by knowing whether the individuals are in any of the stages of enlightenment, the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. If you're supporting someone who's in the fourth stage of enlightenment, that's the highest quality of merit that you could produce, because now you're helping that individual to be able to share their teachings by supporting them, and you're coming in contact with that individual. So there's definitely benefit for you and others by you practicing generosity to support ordained practitioners or teachers, but you would more readily like to know that the recipient that you're practicing is either enlightened or very close to it, because that's where your offering is going to have the most benefit. So having a personal relationship with a teacher so that you can know them is really helpful. That's what's going to produce the most benefit for you.
Yeah, but I actually do not know whether they are, what level of enlightenment are they at, because they come for a few days and they go off somewhere else, that. So I just follow the request that whoever want to do dana, life dana, just provide the food and together everybody. So that's my challenge. I do not know what level they are. I don't have a chance to build a relationship with them because they just come 1-2 days and they go off.
Yeah, there's no harm in what you're doing, right? You're producing benefit. You're producing wholesome karma. But what I'm sharing with you is how to increase that to make sure you're producing even higher qualities of wholesome karma or merit, is by coming in contact with individuals and talking to them. So I wouldn't advise you to stop doing what you're doing, because I wouldn't prevent you from giving a gift, right? But instead, I'm just providing you guidance of how to improve the quality of your merit.
Okay, I understand. So lastly, actually, on the normal generosity, sometimes I do help out with friends and colleagues and all that, issues and all that. That also considered generosity of helping people?
Yes, if you're helping, you're providing your time, effort, energy, or resources more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, this is generosity. And there's different qualities of generosity depending on who you share with, but you're going to need to practice generosity with lots of individuals in order to get to enlightenment. So you should help your colleagues and your coworkers, your neighbors, your family, friends, even people you don't know that you have come in contact with. But remember, you're always looking to practice generosity from the middle way. Whereas if you were craving and sharing excessively, you wouldn't have what you need to take care of your own basic necessities. But if you never shared, your mind would be selfish and stingy. That's not going to lead to your enlightenment either. So you need to practice this generosity from the middle way. It's the same thing with loving kindness and compassion and other wholesome qualities. You need to bring it to the middle. So I'm not sure where you're at with your practice of generosity. Are you sharing with people who are around you and the things that you're doing? Are you sharing with teachers who are sharing teachings with you? This is going to help you to develop your generosity.
Yeah, I just that I do not share or give to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, mostly to my family members and to close friends. And I see if people need my help, I will just help them. These are people that I know and can trust. Not every stranger that I go and help. So sometimes I even go for, let's say, I donate to some underprivileged children's home, old folks' home. These are things. I'm not obsessed with generosity. I just see the situation. If I can have the time, I have the resources, then I'll go in and do it.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like your practice is developing, so that's helpful. So keep looking at that and keep paying attention to your practice of generosity.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'll do then is just thank you all for joining for today's class and remind you that in our next class, we're going to be in the next set of chapters. The next set of chapters is 31 through 41. Usually we go up to 40, but this book has 41 chapters. So we're going to have 11 chapters for next week. So if you'd like to read those ahead of time, you can download the books from buddhadailywisdom.com. You can read it on your electronic device. You can print it. You can get printed versions. That way you can read either before and or after class. This will be really helpful for you. And then tomorrow in our group learning program on Sunday morning or Sunday evening, 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., I'm live streaming all the classes now that I'm teaching at the temple or in the evening here at home on Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday. I'm going to be teaching in the group learning program chapter 3 of volume 1, which is titled Enlightenment. What is enlightenment? This is where you can learn what enlightenment is in detail, because the more you understand what enlightenment is, the more easily you can navigate your way to it. If you didn't understand what enlightenment is, you would have no ability to actually get to enlightenment. So you need to understand what it is in order to be able to navigate your way to it. So I'm going to be teaching you that tomorrow on Sunday. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be in our 4th part of our 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. And then we're going to be moving in on the next Wednesday to a 4-part series on Buddhist chanting, where I'm going to be teaching Buddhist chanting. So you're welcome to attend any of these classes. There's plenty of courses and retreats coming up in the rest of this year and next year as well here in Chiang Mai. And I'm starting to live stream more and more things from the temple to be able to help you guys be able to learn all the various things that I'm sharing with you. But I'm being aware to not share too much, because I feel like if I, live streamed every single thing that I taught at the temple, it might be too much for you guys. So you'll see me offering various live streams and various retreats and courses throughout the year that you guys are always welcome and invited to attend. So I'll see you guys perhaps in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.